Welcome to this lesson, and in this lesson we are going to be studying about arrays. And so arrays in any programming language, and in our case Java to be specific, are used to store a number of variables or many variables or multiple variables instead of declaring too many variables. So take for instance, you wanted to store the number of students or a number of student names in your program. Would you really want to declare 100 variables for student 1, student 2, all the way to student number 100? Obviously, that would be tedious, and that is why we have the arrays. So arrays store related information in one variable, and they can be accessed via their indexes. So that is the purpose for arrays. And how do you define arrays? You define arrays by declaring the variable data type followed by square brackets as such. So for instance, if we wanted to define student names, we would say the data type is of course a string followed by square brackets, and then followed by the name of the variable. So we could say student names. So that is how we define an array. So when we read this program, what we have is a variable, an array variable called student names, and it is of type string. So what Java expects in this case is that we are going to be storing multiple variables in this array. So for instance, how do we actually now store a particular student in that array? How do we do that? And how you do that is that you remember the assignment operator, which is the equal sign, followed by the curly braces. Whenever you put the curly braces, so here we are going to have holders for the various students that we have. So we are going to have student number 1 will be James, and because they are strings, remember to always enclose them within the double quote. So we're going to have James, John. We're also going to have Peter. We're going to have Sarah, Susan, and our final student is going to be Julia. Very good. So we have an array of student names containing 6 students: James, John, Peter, Sarah, Susan, and Julia. This array contains 6 student names, and were we to define different variables for these students, we would be having 6 variables. So you can imagine how tedious that would be. So how do you access these elements? In the previous lessons, we have seen that to access a value stored in a particular variable, you just access it via the variable name. However, in this case, we have one variable storing multiple values. How do we access the first one or the second one or the fifth one or even the last one? And how you do that is using the array indexes. Arrays follow an index structure called the zero-based indexing, which we had mentioned earlier. So we call it the zero-based indexing. Zero-based indexing. And the zero-based indexing means that the first item is index number 0. So we start counting from 0. Second item is index number 1. Very good. So if we wanted to access student James, we would access that particular student via the array index, which is index number 0. And how do we do that? So we're going to use a print statement to be able to find out how we are able to do that. So we are going to say student 1, or the first student, is student names. So the syntax is that you write the name of the array followed by the square brackets, just as with the definition, and within the square brackets you input the index that you would like to access. So in this case, we have written index number 0, meaning we want to access the first student. Let's run our program and find out the results. Very good. And tells us that student number 1 is James, as expected. Let's find out who is student number 3, or student at index number 3. Following the zero-based index, we can of course guess what our program is going to tell us. So James is 0, John is 1, Peter is 2, and at index number 3 is Sarah. So we expect our program to tell us that the student at index number 3 is Sarah. Very good. And tells us just that student at index number 3 is Sarah. So this is how you access particular items in an array. The other thing that I would like us to learn, how do you actually know the number of items that are stored in this array? There is a length property that can use to access the number of items that are stored in the array. So here we are studying about the array length. So, and we are going to just print it out. Array length. And how do you access that particular property? You access it via the name of the array dot length. For instance, student names dot length. So if I write student names dot length, it's going to return to me, the Java program is going to return the count or the number of items that are in this array. Just to verify, what do we expect our program to tell us? We have 6 of them. 1 item, 2 items, 3 items, 4 items, 5 items, and the 6th item, which is the final item. So we expect that our program is going to tell us that our array has how many items? 6 items. Very good. And tells us that our array length is of 6 items. So something else I would like us to learn is which is the last index of an array? Which is the last index of an array? The last index of an array is normally one less the number of items that are in that array. And why is that so? It is so because we are using a zero-based index system, where, for instance, if we were to count for our various students here, we count James is index number 0, John is index number 1, Peter is index number 2, Sarah index number 3, Susan is index number 4, and Julia is index number 5, which is the last student. Now, the last index, which is 5, is 1 less, meaning 6 minus 1. And that is because we are using a zero-based index. Please always keep that in mind. And why is it important for you to keep that in mind? So that you can also avoid errors or exceptions called the array out of bounds exception. For instance, let me actually type that, array out of bounds exception. Always remember to take care of this, and that is why we were learning that particular concept. So let's say I would like to print out a student number 6. But remember, from what we have learned there is that we don't have index number 6 in this case. Student 6. So student names, remember how we access a student by the array index. Let's find out what our program is going to do. Of course, it's going to give us an error. And that is what I would like you to see. Actually, it's called the array index out of bounds. Yes, exactly. So it tells us that we have an exception in main, array index out of bounds exception, and the message is that index 6 is out of bounds for length 6. So please take note of that. In as much as our array is of size 6, we do not have index number 6. The last index is always one less than the length of the array. Very good. So the last item that I would like us to study, is how do you actually access the last item, given that you do not know the number. You do not know the number of items that are in that array, or you don't know the indexes. How do you access that? So how you access that, let me actually name it so you don't experience another error. So the last item, how do you access it? You can access it via, let's define a variable, a string variable, last item equals to student names, and within that we are going to find out what is the length minus 1. Student names dot length, select the wrong button there. Student names dot length minus 1. And why minus 1? To find out the last value. Very good. So I'm going to print out the last item. So that should automatically print out for us Julia. So remember that the last item is always, the index of the last item is always one less than the length. And that is why we are doing a minus 1. Please always keep that in mind. That's a very important point. So student number 6 is Julia. Very good. Key takeaways from this lesson. 1. Arrays. What are they? They are used to store multiple variables in one array. Second thing, arrays are use a zero-based index, meaning the first item is index number 0, and the last item is the length of the array minus 1. Third thing, that key point, how do you access an item in an array? Fourth point, how do you access the last item of an array? And another point, another key important point, how do you avoid the array index out of bounds exception? Thank you very much. Please keep in the series, stay in the series, and keep learning. Enjoy. See you in the next video. Thank you.